Hi, friends. It's Brad and Lisa.
Hello.
We are putting an episode into the main feed that we were not necessarily anticipating. This is a Patreon preview episode. We are restarting our Married to Singles series exclusively in our Patreon feed. That's where we talk to comic book creators about their favorite single issue books. Previously, we've had conversations with Daniel Warren Johnson about the Nom number 9. We talked to Christian Ward about Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on a Serious Earth. And this episode is a conversation with Tyler Crook all about Mage, the Hero Discovered number 6.
We've been chasing our tails a little bit coming out of the New Year holiday. Brad's been sick. My migraines have been going crazy. So instead of putting together something that is entirely new or finishing something that is in the can, we are instead giving you a little sneak peek, a morsel of what we have going on in our Patreon community with our Patreon content, because we love that stuff as well, and we want you to check it out if you haven't already.
If you were expecting our conversation with Rick Quinn and Dave Chisholm all about Spectrum number 2, that is still coming next Wednesday, the 22nd, which is when the actual issue comes out in comic book shops. We were wrong about that. But the truth is, like Lisa said, like our bodies shut down this past week. Lisa was spending most of her day in total darkness. I was really weirdly sick. I didn't catch COVID, but I did feel terrible. I feel great now. Lisa, how do you feel?
I don't know yet. We'll see.
We're figuring that out on this Monday. And we're also trying to figure out how we can help those affected by the LA wildfires. We will be giving the proceeds of our Patreon feed in January to BINC, the Book Industry Charitable Foundation. They are helping out all the bookstores and comic book stores affected by the LA fires. And bookshop.org is matching any donation up to $10,000. However, there are many other organizations offering aid to those that need it. And we will have links in the show notes of this episode to those organizations so that you can pick the one that best suits your vibe, really.
The last thing is that in this episode, Tyler Crook mentions a project that he has with Chris Cantwell that he can't announce yet. Well, it's been announced. We've read it. It's great. It's out of Alcatraz. And I hope you're looking forward to it because it's really good.
Yeah. So with that all said, let's get to Tyler Crook talking about Mage, the Hero Discovered number 6.
Pew pew.
Bum bum bottom 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 bum bum doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 bum bottom bum bum doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 bum bum bottom bum bum bottom ba da 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 ba doopy doopy da.
What's up, lovebirds? It's Brad and Lisa.
Hello.
Welcome to our Married to Singles podcast series published exclusively to our Patreon feed.
The purpose of these conversations is to invite rad creators and comic professionals onto the podcast and have them celebrate one of their favorite single issues. Not a graphic novel, unless you're Christian Ward. That was a graphic novel. Not a long story arc, just one single issue.
So today's guest is a comic book couples counseling favorite. He's been on the main show multiple times with deep dives into his Dark Horse Comics series, The Lonesome Hunters, which he writes and draws, and was just published in a gorgeous and massive hardcover library edition. Perhaps you've also partaken in his ultra creepy comic series, Harrow County. And you can catch him every Friday on YouTube with his comic book cool down live streams. It's Tyler Crook. Welcome.
Yay! Hey, everybody.
Hello.
We are here to talk about Mage, the Hero Discovered number 6, written and illustrated by Matt Wagner and inked by Sam Kieth. This was published by Comico in March of 1985. Is it Comico, Tyler, or is it Comico?
I have always said Comico, but I do not know. I could not tell you.
All right. This is something that I've never said before into a microphone. I've always seen it, and then I said it, and I was like, I don't know if that's right. But
Comico does make more sense. It's like the biopic.
Oh no, let's
debate.
not have that debate. No. But we have a few facts here about March of 1985.
Let's
Tyler,
see.
do you have any guess as to what the #1 movie at the box office in March of 1985
Oh,
was?
1985. No, I can't no, I can't really guess. I would say it's got to be something like Gremlins or like Ghostbusters or
Close,
something.
close.
You are in the neighborhood.
It's an action comedy. It is Beverly Hills Cop.
Oh, okay.
Of course, the highest grossing movie of the year would actually end up being Back to the Future. The most popular song of the year was Careless Whisper by George Michael, with Madonna's Like a Virgin coming in at #2. And, I remember this well because my dad was so mad. But this was the year in April when Coke became New Coke.
Wow, I did not realize that I was that young when that happened. That really felt like something that like that was an epic drama that stretched on for years.
Yes, yes. And if you mention New Coke to my father today, he will have a rant about it.
Can you
What's
still
what?
buy New Coke?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. It's
I
just
hope
classic
not.
I
Coke.
don't know. I've never had New Coke.
But we have had Oreo flavored Coke.
Yeah, and it was okay. When was Crystal Pepsi? Because that I do remember Crystal Pepsi.
That was later.
That was a 90s thing, right?
Yeah.
That was a 90s thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Super Mario Brothers also made its debut in September of this year. And in November of this year, comic book wise, we got Calvin and Hobbes debuting in newspapers.
I love Calvin and Hobbes.
That's funny. Like I actually did not read this book until I think it was 86 was when I first started reading this. So my whole Mage experience, and in fact, I didn't even find all the issues. It probably took me like 3 years to find every issue. So my experience was like 86 to 89 or whatever.
Mm.
Who were you at
to-
that
to
time?
read. Who was I?
Yeah, like what were you
I
like? What
was-
were you up to?
I was very young. So I was, let's see here, in 86, I would have been 12.
Primo
Yeah,
time to
sure.
make some lifelong nerd loves.
Yeah, no, that's a great time to like start awakening. And I was a couple years into sort of my comic book obsession, and this was sort of just mind-blowing to me because this was like the first thing I ever read that wasn't like superheroes. That wasn't just
Yeah.
a straight up like sort of this mainline Marvel DC stuff that you could get at the grocery store. And if I remember right, I got this the first time I went to, or I got a couple issues the first time I went to San Diego Comic-Con, which was like
Oh.
me and my buddy Zach. We lived about an hour and a half north of San Diego at that time, and me and my friend Zach went and we stayed with my aunt and we went to Comic-Con for like 2 days. I think it might have only been a 2-day convention at the time.
Yeah.
And I met Kevin Eastman on that trip, and I picked up a couple issues, just random issues of Mage, and it was because of the covers. Like I think it might have been the cover for #5 actually that got me to get it. And it's this picture of Kevin Matchstick looking like with his hands through the bars of a jail cell, just looking stern. And
Oh,
I was
yeah.
just like that's the coolest looking comic cover I'd ever seen at the time.
The shading on that cover is incredible.
Yeah. I gotta ask, did you guys read it digitally or did you get print?
So I was looking for a print copy. I
Mhm.
ordered a print copy. It has not arrived on time. So we
Okay.
ended up having to read it digitally, which means we were not able to read the Grendel backup story.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Yeah. That and the coloring, because they had to recolor it for all the newer print editions and the digital stuff. So yeah, I was just a little nerd at the time. I didn't live anywhere near a comic shop, and I didn't have, I was 12, so I wasn't driving obviously, but it took me maybe twice a year I could get a ride into the closest comic shop was in Oceanside, California at a shop called House of Armand. And it was one of those that was like it really had that like head shop porn store feel.
Yep.
And it was amazing to go in as like a 12 and 13-year-old and be like, yeah, this is where I'm gonna get my comics. And yeah, so I was just digging through back issue boxes to find all my copies of Mage. And I was so obsessed with this book as a kid that my mom has a story she likes to tell where I made her sit down and read it because I didn't have anyone I could talk to about it.
What was your impression of it? Was she like, "This is rad, son. I'm so proud. I've never been
I
more
think
proud."
it's funny. I think it was like I think it was sort of the first time she understood me as an artist.
Mm.
Well, partially because I was always doing comic strips of myself as a character at the time. And reading this, like the main character in Mage, Kevin Matchstick, is like literally just Matt Wagner.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just him. Well, I think the character's different, but it looks exactly like him,
Yeah,
sort
yeah.
of dealing with his own personal concerns at the time. And I think my mom sort of saw that and was like, "Oh, I get it. Tyler like draws all this stuff because he works through his stuff that way."
Yeah. I feel like this is a comic based on like this is the only issue I've read. We didn't read the previous issues, Tyler. We didn't
Oh.
read any issues after. You selected number 6, so we read 6. Uh and my impression from it was, if this had come to me at that critical age, I feel like it would be easy to hand this to a teacher, easy to hand to my parents and go like, look, there's more in here than just violence or whatever you think a comic book is.
Hmm.
Every chapter is a quote from Hamlet. It's obviously fueled by mythology,
Hmm.
a literary aesthetic. I think a parent or a guardian would sense the value in a book like this versus like me handing them Wildcats or Spawn.
Yeah, yeah. No, this is like so if you do you guys so you guys don't know like the overall story arc.
We
Are we
have no
spoiling?
idea what's going on. Yeah,
Please spoil.
let's spoil it. We just didn't want to go beyond the parameters of Tyler picked this issue.
This is a random conceit that we are married to.
Okay. So Kevin Matchstick is essentially the reincarnation of King Arthur, and
Amazing.
Mirth is essentially Merlin. And then I think Sean is whole made up whole cloth just for the story.
So
And Ed,
Sean is like throughout, like Sean always exists.
yeah, he's introduced in this issue and then stays, becomes a main character,
Okay,
an
that's
ongoing
interesting.
character. And the other main character who doesn't appear in this is Edsel, who is a young woman who drives an Edsel car. And at the end, they're like, in this life, she liked cars. In a previous life, she was really into lakes because
Oh,
she's the lady of the lake. So it's all
oh,
Arthurian mythology stuff. And I think even the red caps are like an Arthurian thing. Or they're like sort of like English fairy mythology stuff.
and like one of the things that Kevin Matchstick has, and like my first encounter with Mage was through a Randy Bowen statue back in the 90s that
Oh,
he had
interesting.
sculpted, and he had that baseball bat. And I never
Mhm.
understood, like, well, what's the deal with this baseball bat? But apparently that's Excalibur.
Yeah, exactly.
Rad.
That's exactly what it is. I was just gonna say this is sort of like the only real Arthurian stuff that I've ever read. Like I've sort of been like every time I think about it, I'm like, oh man, I should read some like the real like the source materials for King Arthur. But then I look it up and it's all like there's a million books that are just like modern riffs on it. And I'm like, no, I want
Yeah.
to read like the real thing. And I
Yeah.
just haven't spent the time to figure out what the real
I
thing is.
I read the Sword in the Stone as a kid, and then
Mhm.
also there was
But that
the
was like a
Disney
70.
movie. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 and
Yeah.
then there was like a Disney movie, and then there was
What?
a Guy Ritchie movie maybe.
There was. I like that Guy Ritchie
And
movie.
then everything else I was in a community theater production of Camelot, and I
Yeah.
played
Oh.
Nimue. Yes.
I loved Once and Future King,
Yeah. Okay, this
and
is what I'm talking about.
I think
I think
I think
this is
you
what I'm
are.
talking about. I'm talking about Once in Future King.
Really loved that book. And Scott Morris does a comic called Soulwind, and just mentioning that book is a bit of a spoiler for that book, but it's got Arthurian ties.
Oh, I read I haven't read all of Soulwind. I have the beautiful hardcover edition.
Yeah, yeah,
Because I had bought the first like trade when they were coming out from, what was that, Oni was
yeah.
doing that? And then I was like, oh, I need to get the whole thing. And then it has been in my to read pile for like an embarrassing
Well, I've just
time.
spoiled a big twist.
Okay.
Sorry. So sorry.
I'll forget by the time I get to it.
So why this issue of all of the possible issues?
This issue was the last issue that I got. So I had read every other issue except for issue 6, and this was the last one that I was able to track down and buy. And so it was like this cover is just ingrained in my head because I knew what it looked like, and I just flipped through so many long boxes looking for this before I actually finally found a copy.
And were you reading the issues as you found the copies?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I read them completely out of order.
That's so fun.
Yeah. That's something like I kind of miss about comics nowadays. Is like there's something really and it doesn't always work, but at least at the time it was like it was kind of compelling to read stories out of order and then have to decode them and figure out how it actually fits back together.
Yeah, I always had this idea that we should do a new series that is structured as if you were finding random issues in a long box.
That's fun.
So like the first issue you read, because like the first Spider-Man comic I ever read was 347, Venom Island, Eric Larson. And I didn't know what had happened before, and it would be years before I found out what happened after. And then you would find like, you know, a 200 issue, and then you'd find like a 100 issue, a Ditko issue. And I feel like there's a way you could have a lot of fun telling a narrative.
Like dice involved, you know.
Yeah. That actually sounds like a Matt Kindt book.
Yes.
Would be them presented out of order like that.
Yeah.
That's fun. So when you finally read this, you were probably filled with anticipation of what could the missing piece tell you.
Yeah.
Like, do you remember that feeling and any impressions that you got? Were you satisfied? Were you disappointed?
I think I was satisfied. I think the main thing was that the issue 5 was inked by Matt Wagner. Issue 6 is inked by Sam Kieth, and then the rest of the series is inked by Sam Kieth. And there was a like that was a huge question mark in my mind, was like, what happened? How did that? And this was sort of before I really paid real close attention to any of the credits. So for probably a year, I thought that Matt Wagner had just like completely changed his inking style before I like looked at the thing and saw that Sam Kieth was inking it. And I guess for people listening, this is the same Sam Kieth that did the Max.
Right. Yeah.
Later.
And you look at the red caps in particular, and I feel like I see a lot of that Sandman Sam Kieth, that Max Sam Kieth in the inking of those characters.
But there's also like, because he's inking over Matt Wagner, like the lines are way pared down. Like there's the rendering is sort of more conservative, and you know, it's just about these defining these like single large shapes and the shadows.
Brad mentioned like, oh, this would be the kind of thing like Bone or something where you would go like, no, you know, comics are books too. See, Mom? But there is like, I would say just from this issue, like a juvenility to it as well, like a silly slapstick aspect, particularly with the red caps. Excuse me. Triggering phrase. Yeah. Like where they are dressed kind of like a Puss in Boots, where they're wearing a jacket, but underneath they're just like completely nude.
Well, that moment when Kevin smashes the red cap and then the red cap falls flat on his face and then has his ass up in the air is like a great fun page.
And I interpreted it as like, did he hit him so hard that his pants fell down? And then I had to go back and go like, what about the pants? But there are no pants. There've never been pants.
Yeah, that actually becomes a plot point later, because another spoiler, they track down where the Grackle Flints are, where their headquarters is, because there's a laundry tag in one of the coats, and they take it to a laundromat, and it turns out that it's associated with a casino. They bring in like random clothes because I guess they feel it's uncouth to send these red caps out with at least without some sort of clothes on.
Mhm.
Yeah, the other thing that like the reason I think it's reading this as a single issue as opposed to reading the new like the trades and stuff is the coloring in this.
Mm.
And it's
Which we do not
like
see.
if you haven't ever seen it, like I don't know if you can even see from this, but it's just like it's all airbrushed.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know, like I've heard an interview with Matt Wagner where he just mentioned everyone in the studio where he was working cutting frisket and like just assembly line coloring these books. And they're just really striking how they're colored. And I'm almost certain that it's like alcohol markers.
Mm.
Mm.
You can get an airbrush adapter for your alcohol markers that'll like spray the ink from the tip, just like and it works just like an airbrush. But that would
Yeah,
it's and the other part of the history of this is I'm not sure if like the original colors got lost because they degraded over time. Alcohol markers do that, where they don't last permanent. Like they're not always very light fast. But also, when Comico went out of business, there was a rights struggle over a lot of this stuff, and like they tried to steal Grendel from Matt Wagner, and actually the publisher, the guy who started Comico, showed up on Twitter a couple years ago and was like a maniac.
huh.
Such a like the scammiest dude ever. Like he was like going on Twitter trying to start up a new comic thing and was like making claims like he would fly all of his creators out to like a Malibu beach house where they would make their comics and it
Like
was
one of
just
those influencer houses, but it was just full of comic book
or
artists.
full of comics, yeah. And he was claiming that he was like that he would pay like advances of $1 million for a book and stuff. And it's
Oh,
just like,
okay.
Jesus.
like
Like when we're digging.
I don't know what his game was, but it sounded more like a mental break than it was an actual scam, you know.
It is fascinating. I don't think I had realized that it took Matt Wagner so long to complete Mage. You know, even after this run, it goes to Image, but not until
Oh,
1997.
yeah, the this when did this series end? Let me grab my
Well, like the final, the Hero Denied began, like chapters began publication with an introductory zero issue in July of 2017. And the final issue came out in February 27th in 2019.
Yikes.
Okay. So those are each like complete story arcs. So
Okay.
this story ends with issue 15, and it ended in 86. And I forgot until I was like, I actually read this issue last night. And the last page is this ad that's like, stay tuned for Mage 2 coming
Oh,
soon.
man.
And then
That's a
it
long
was
wait.
like you said, it was a decade or more before the next thing came out. And by then he was doing it in Image.
Yeah. Yeah. And, Wagner has had such an evolution as an artist. I'm
Mhm.
excited to one finally read the rest of this volume, but then I'm like even more excited to read the stuff that came out from 2017 and 2019 to see if he can carry it all the way through.
Yeah. Yeah. The vibe definitely shifts between this and that.
Yeah, I imagine so.
Yeah. But
And
I think they're worth reading for
And
sure.
so, you mentioned how, it's like Matt Wagner working things out for himself. It's like an autobiographical book with a fantasy bent. And that was one of the things that you found attractive. Like, what do you think Matt Wagner was working out with these early issues?
That's a good question. And I kind of hesitate to speculate because I don't know what was
Hmm,
going on in his life at the
sure.
time.
Right.
But I will say that one of the really amazing things about this series is that it's all this is going to sound so corny, but it's also like the cartoonist discovered. Like if you pick up the first issue of this, there's definitely a spark of something really cool with the story in the first issue, but it's like incredibly amateurish. Like
Hmm.
it's the sort of book where you sort of pick it up and you're like, how did this get like why did they let this guy make a book because he's not a good artist.
That's a
You know?
general theme with Comica, though. Like when I'm digging in
Yeah.
bins, you pick up something wild, odds are.
Yeah. But but he over the course of this series, he like really like his art got so much better. His storytelling got so much better. His like the coloring got better. It's like the whole package came together.
I mean,
And you
this
could
is
see that it's
such
like him becoming a real professional cartoonist in the process.
this is such a critical moment in comics. I mean, we are coming right off of the introduction of Ninja Turtles and talking
Hmm.
about a book that is very amateurish, but that amateurishness is its attraction.
Yeah.
Like I feel like this is a moment, you know, we get the black and white boom. This is not a black and white comic, but it feels of a piece with the black and white boom. People striking out and doing their
Hmm.
own thing. And now there's a hunger for that type of comic.
Yeah, and there's a real sense in this era where it's like you could do a superhero comic that is more like I don't want to say more complex, but more like the people don't have to have an origin story where they're like, the DA who gets hit by a nuclear rat or whatever. I don't know
Yeah.
what. Like
Yeah.
there's a sense of like there's other ways to tell these fantastical stories other than sort of the sci-fi direction that so many superhero characters come from.
Yeah, and to take a real earnestness approach to superhero comics. This is
Yeah.
pre-Watchmen, it's pre-Dark Knight Returns, but you can see how something like this sort of foretells that moment too.
I don't know if I'd really realized that. When was Dark Knight Returns?
Dark Knight Returns is 86, right?
Okay.
Watchmen also 86. I'm gonna Google
Yeah.
that real quick, but I believe
Yeah,
that's true.
I have that thing where it's like because I didn't have access to a comic shop, I wasn't getting anything like the day it came out. Everything I learned was like, a year or two or three or four after the book came out, I would sort of learn about it and start reading it.
Yeah, so Watchmen is 1986, the first issue.
Okay.
You mentioned like this isn't like a sci-fi origin story, like
Hmm.
something happened to you and the thing that was supposed to kill you has made you stronger and now you have
Yeah.
to deal with that strength, where like this is to me what I think is like the typical kind of fantasy story where you want to tell a modern fantasy story, so you go into a chosen one direction, right?
Hmm.
Where like, oh, it turns out I'm secretly this, I'm secretly King Arthur, or I am the one predestined to defeat Voldemort, like whatever. What I like about I'll say it this way, because I'm not the hugest fantasy fan, to tell the truth. Like if something has an orc in it, or if people are, wearing armor, you know what I mean? I'm like, no thanks. Like, is it a musical? You know what I mean? But like with the Chosen One story, where sci-fi is like, okay, you are imposing, you have a power and you are going to impose it on people, where I feel like fantasy is a genre of submission, where it's like you have to get out of your own way to allow the prophecy or to allow the
Hmm.
magic, or to happen. And like to me in this sixth issue, and I'm going to suspect that throughout the series, like despite being exposed to Mirth's magic and people from the fairy realm and all of this stuff, Kevin is clinging to this like skepticism and this
Hmm.
like doubt. One of my favorite scenes in this issue is between Kevin and Sean, where Sean is coming to grips with like, oh, I might be a ghost. I'm being told I'm probably a ghost and I have unfinished business. And because of my ghost properties, I can't remember exactly what I'm supposed to be up to. Kevin is explaining, like, even though I'm exposed to all this stuff, I'm still doubting it. And I'm holding on to this doubt because this doubt is going to make me safe, keep me safe. And Sean goes like, hey, if I don't come with you guys, am I going to end up like with Kevin? And Mirth is like, yeah, maybe. And he's like, okay, I'm coming with you, because I would hate to be this person who is
Yeah.
proud or trapped in their doubt or clinging to their doubt.
Well, the thing, like, and this was sort of, especially as a young man, this was a story that I had never read where like Kevin Matchstick is the chosen one, but he like desperately does not want that responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And so he sort of ignores a lot of the like very clear signals that are being sent to him that he is this chosen one. And in fact, he actively denies it. And to the end, sort of with tragic results,
Mm,
they do
mm.
beat the bad guys at the end, but sort of at the cost of all these people that were supporting him through this whole adventure. And that was like really that like I said, that was something I'd never read before. I'd always, seen the thing where it's like, oh, I got bit by the radioactive spider. I guess I have to be a hero now. Like I don't have any other choice. I have to,
Right.
but he's sort of like, no, I do have a choice, and I'm not gonna do it. And then
Yeah.
has to learn the lesson that he has the responsibility anyway.
He rejects the call to action,
Yeah, yeah.
and I think that is very classic mythological heroism, but it is not contemporary heroism.
Yeah,
Well,
especially in comics.
Yeah.
when I grew up, I was into the Disney princess movies.
Mhm.
And the Disney princess movies was like you would get the auroras where like she was this princess, but then she had to be hidden in the forest and she was raised by these fairies that she thinks are her aunts or whatever. And then it turns out she's a secret princess. And so of course, like as a small girl, I'm like, these aren't my real parents. You know what I mean? Where I think to a young kid, like the idea of going like, I am not in my place because of powers that are not under my control,
Mhm.
if my context were slightly different, I would be so extraordinarily special. Like to like young readers, I think that like that's an extremely like powerful message because they have so
Yeah.
little autonomy anyway, as kids.
Yeah, I mean this sort of occupies a similar space, at least for me, where like as a little kid, I was sort of like, hey, maybe I'm the chosen one too, which is kind of cringy in a way, like
Yeah.
but so I don't know how I feel about that element of the story, but I do like thinking about it as more of a responsibility thing where it's like he has this responsibility to use his powers and he doesn't do it, and like I said, it there's some tragic results to that. And if he had actually just picked up the mantle and done his job, he would have things may have gone better.
This issue does the fun thing also though of Kevin is really coming into his own with his powers but also messing up. One of the best scenes in this
Yeah.
comic for me is when he jumps into the elevator shaft to go after the character in white that I cannot remember, the trench coat man.
One of the
The
grackle
Grackle
flints.
Flint.
Yeah, the
Laszlo?
grackle.
Is his name Laszlo? Or is Laszlo someone else?
I can never keep
Laszlo.
them straight. I'm
Yeah.
like
Okay,
everyone in
good.
the book. I
He's
can't
not
tell
the
them
only
apart.
Laszlo.
Yeah.
He's
So
the only
he's
Laszlo.
jumping after the guy in the trench coat in the elevator, and he's going to catch up to him. He's like, I'm very confident that I'm going to hop on this elevator, smash in, and capture this guy. But he does not realize how powerful he is, and he shoots right through the top of the elevator, through the bottom, and goes gosh know where, to the other side of the planet as far as I know. And Mirth has to come and rescue him out of that shaft. I thought that was a great action beat with
Yeah.
kind of a fun twist to heroism.
This whole issue is kind of an extended fight scene, and almost everything that Kevin does is like that. Like they're hiding behind a desk, and Mirth is putting up this magic barrier to protect him, and Kevin is like, "Oh, I have this idea," and he kicks the desk to take out one of the red caps, but then it opens up, like now the barrier that Mirth has set up is useless, and like
Yeah.
he punches another guy, and just in time, Mirth pulls him down and is like, "You almost got hit from behind." He's just not good at this stuff,
Yeah.
And that's another thing that I had never read at the time, was somebody who was not good at being a hero.
It reminded me a little bit of Jack Burton in Big Trouble in Little China, which is a movie
Yeah,
that would come later, where Kurt Russell's character constantly thinks like, I've got this, and he never has this.
yeah,
There's
yeah.
something
Well,
super
like
appealing
what's
about
funny is like Kevin is like, I don't have this, and in fact, he doesn't have it.
that.
I
But he
do
has
like
the
to.
potential.
So when he is inflicting on other people, he's pretty brazen about it, But when it's
Mhm.
time to jump into that shaft, even though he knows, like, I'm invulnerable now, he still has to go like, okay, you know, like this is going to be totally fine. And I really like that as an idea of going like, you know, what are the choices you would make if you knew that you would not get hurt?
And it injects a level of relatability,
Yeah,
right?
100%. And I think that's the entire point of Kevin is like we could all self-insert into Kevin a little bit.
Yeah. Well, they also, I don't know if they make it clear in this issue, but they establish earlier that he has a fear of heights.
Ah.
So jumping down that shaft was actually kind of a big step for him.
Oh, that's rad.
Oh, that's one of those
Yeah.
rational fears. I wish I had a rational fear. I have irrational fears. I have irrational ones. Who I didn't quite understand was the character of Rasham. Yeah, is he like throughout the entire series?
With the
or-
staple gun at the end.
Yeah.
The staple gun guy. He does come back and plays a critical role, but he it's funny. In the very next issue, so this issue ends with Rasham and his buddy about to, you know, get the drop on Kevin as he's coming out the back of the police station. And if you read the next issue, they lose track of Kevin like in the next 30 seconds. Like they get distracted looking at like talking about the staple gun, and then Kevin Eastman and Mirth just sort of wander off and they're like, and then they don't show up again until like issue 14 or something. They show up again.
Interesting.
Yeah. And that's just, I don't know enough about hoodoo or
Right.
or what religion this is, but it feels researched. I couldn't tell you though.
Yeah, no, me neither. Everything I know is from Princess and the Frog.
Yeah.
Well,
Yep.
you know, the character that Rasham is communicating with in that sort of jail cell chain, like it's like a specter of some kind.
He says he says that I'm like the essence of you, like I am some kind of projection from Rasham, which is an interesting idea.
I found the design of that character and obviously what the character is saying to be like really like creepy. I think it's effective, and there's like the illustration of that specter is, you know, simple but upsetting.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know, I guess I don't know too if this is clear just if you've only read this issue, but that character, the sort of the Black Spectre, is the guy at the end in the red suit whose name I cannot remember. He's like the big bad guy.
Oh, okay.
He's like
Yeah.
projecting himself to these guys in their prison cell and pretending to be
That was not
call
clear. That is fantastic. And his final panel, the panel before the last page, I think is very effective, where he is shadowed out. The features of his face are shadowed out, and he's blowing cigarette smoke through his nostrils. That's one of my favorite images of the entire issue.
Yeah, and I don't think we ever fully see his face. Like there's a couple of things in the very last issue where you can kind of see his face, but only as he's sort of being defeated.
Interesting.
In the shadows, he does kind of like I can kind of attach him to that other shape.
It reminds me of how Todd McFarlane will illustrate a lot of villains in Spider-Man issues and Spawn issues. I was just looking at the Dave Sims Spawn issue where he can't reveal that Superman is there, but it's Superman. And the face is drawn very similar, or it's obscured in a very similar fashion to that final panel.
You get the like noir vibes.
Yeah, but they
noir doesn't
do
own shadows.
They do a good job of keeping him mysterious feeling through the whole series, which is cool. And the Grackle Flints, I need to go back through. I noticed in the later issues, because the Grackle Flints are these guys whose skin is white as like paper, have no ears. They have these little spurs on their elbows that are like their weapon. There's like there's 5 brothers, and they're all identical. And towards the end of the series, Matt Wagner starts coloring them like Ninja Turtle style, where like one of them will have like purple pants and the other one will have green pants and one will have blue pants. So you can kind of track them a little bit better.
I love that.
So the other thing about this whole series actually that like I think has been kind of influential to me is these splash pages.
Yeah.
That are, I'd never ever seen anything like this, where the first splash page is just a graphic design title page. They all look the same, except for the color changes every issue. And then it has the title of the issue. Like this issue was titled "Alas, Poor Ghost."
And I did look that up in Hamlet. It comes at the moment when Hamlet's father's ghost instructs Hamlet to get revenge on Claudius.
Oh, okay.
And it makes sense because Sean is being introduced, and Sean is in fact a ghost,
That is true.
or a symbol of like powerlessness, like being a lack of sense of control. Or
Yeah, it's funny because like Sean ends up being kind of the organizing force behind them. Him being a district attorney as his job sort of gives him he just sort of walks in and is like, okay, here's our plan. And he starts making plans for how they can attack the bad guys and do stuff.
how
But the
about
other
the thing
thing-
with his memory? Like his memory only is like he has only short-term memory. Is that something that goes through the entire thing, or?
Yeah, and that's a thing that sort of comes up a little bit later. And it doesn't end up being like a huge plot point, but it is something with his character where he'll be like, he will have collected a clue and will be like, oh, what was that? What did it was like right there. I know it. And then he finally remembers it just in time for them to do something about it,
Fun.
The other thing is that all the covers were these wraparound covers.
Oh,
That's fun.
that cover is so good.
Yeah.
And it has the insert of Grendel
the
there.
Grendel insert. Which also, that's another reason why I picked this issue, was because these aren't the first Grendel comics. He had like a 2 or 3 issue series with Comico that was black and white, but I think this is basically a rewriting. Like I think he adjusted the character a little bit and sort of is retelling the story of Hunter Rose. But it's all told in this just gorgeous like Art Deco,
Yeah.
huge
cool.
blocks of text.
Yeah.
And this was like just another thing that really blew my mind when I was reading it. Like I'd never seen a comic where the pages were as designed as this.
Yeah.
Because it's just like every single page is this beautiful expression of Art Deco sensibilities.
I have read some Grendel. As a teenager, I had a massive Grendel War Child Randy Bowen statue in my bedroom, but I only had like 5 Grendel comics myself. Lisa has not yet experienced Grendel, and I'm excited about that. I think she will dig it. But it does beg the question, Grendel, I feel like, came out, struck a nerve, and I think his popularity has come and gone. I think we've got a little bit of an upswing as Dark Horse Comics has started publishing Grendel stories right now. But Mage never quite carried on with Grendel in popularity. At least that's my estimation.
Yeah, I think that's I feel like Mage is definitely it's a book that's made for a specific kind of reader. You know what I mean? It's not like, I don't think it has the same mass appeal that Grendel does. Well, and part of Grendel's appeal though is that there's so much Grendel. Like it's not like Grendel is a single character. It's like Grendel is sort of a framework upon which to hang all these different stories.
Yeah.
So like the first Grendel is Hunter Rose, who's this sort of like, if Batman was a criminal kind of a character, like if Bruce Wayne decided to become a criminal instead of becoming the Batman, that's how you get Grendel. The second Grendel story arc is like about his Hunter Rose's adopted daughter, or the daughter of his adopted daughter, so his adopted granddaughter.
Yeah.
But she's finding out about her grandfather who was Grendel, and fighting vampires in the process. And then it's like, then there's a guy who's like having a psychotic break who becomes Grendel. And then it's these police procedural stories. And then it's like the sci-fi Grendel fighting this like future vampire who's the Pope.
Yeah.
And like, it's sort of, just like it ventures into these places where you would never, like if you read the Grendels in the back of Mage number 6, and then you read the Grendel that's coming out today, you would be like, I missed something.
Yeah, for sure. I think, also the iconography of Grendel is undeniable. You know,
That
it's
mask
just,
is incredible.
yeah, exactly. And that probably has a lot to do with it as well. When you selected this issue, I was thinking like, okay, why the Mage for Tyler Crook? And I started to think, Matt Wagner at this time, and always really, he does it all. And you said, it's also kind of like you could call this book The Cartoonist Discovered. And I imagine the appeal of somebody just going out and making their own damn comic is enough to excite Tyler Crook.
Yeah, that's probably very true. Yeah, this was like, with him having his self-insert into this book, it really was like the first time I imagined that this is a thing that people can do, Like I kind of, at this point in my comic book reading, I sort of understood that comics were made by human beings and that there was writers and artists and they had different jobs and like they did this thing. I posted a thing online a couple weeks ago because I had a memory about reading comics with my friend Zach, the same guy that I went to San Diego with, and we were like, we were sitting there reading, and I had noticed the credits and read them for the first time, and was like, "Whoa, this book was drawn by this guy." And then I was like, "But at the grocery store, there were like 4 copies. How did he draw all 4 copies and they look exactly the same?"
Amazing.
That's so
yeah,
sweet.
it's a process to learn this stuff. But this was like really like, yeah, this was really the first time I had read a comic that was like one guy doing the whole thing. And it was like so undeniably a perspective of the author, And this was like, it wasn't just like an author giving you another Spider-Man story. It's like, this was very clearly an author telling you a story that they wanted to get out of themselves and they wanted people to see.
And as a reader, I love that. Like sometimes
Yeah.
people poo-poo self-insert characters, but I love them because to me it gives me like a sense of intimacy with the author. Like you get a sense of like, not only am I which I know is a conceit, like it's not true, but it feels like, okay, well, I'm getting closer to a person by reading this thing.
I have mixed feelings about it. Like, I was actually just complaining about the Dark Tower series, that's Stephen King, and how like he self-inserted himself in that. And I was just like, I stopped reading that and have never gone back. I was like, I don't want to read this book.
Yep. It's interesting. I think there are like so many levels of inserting oneself into their work. Stephen King is in that book. Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling, that like suddenly that so much of the real world gets into the Dark Tower. I think about Grant Morrison on Animal Man, but then I think about The Lonesome Hunters, and you've been on the show multiple times now talking about that book, and clearly that book has a lot of you in it too. But
we'll pick that one we would go like that, and that's Tyler right there.
Exactly. The Tyler Crook character does not appear.
When the character walks across the screen and it says Tyler Crook on his shirt, like that's when you know it's a self-insert.
Yeah.
If we were to tie some like thematic things from Mage to Lonesome Hunters, obviously it would be the veil between what is magic and what is our reality is actually extremely thin, and at any moment the magic can reach out and take you.
Well, and the call to action and the rejection of the call of action is in Lonesome Hunters as well.
Yeah.
And not being good at being a hero is
yes.
Which is an unusual chosen one thing. Like especially like in like YA spaces or for young reader spaces, it's very normal to be the chosen one and then go into the competition and win first prize, and you're also the prettiest and you are the smartest, or your friend who's not attractive as you is the smartest, and aren't they great to have around?
Yeah. And like for me, that's like profoundly boring. Like the character who's really good at what they do, and then they do it, and then they're good at it, and then that's the end of the story, is sort of like it's not always boring. They can be really fun, but like the really like exciting stories are always somebody who has to rise to the moment, who has to learn something and become something new in order to achieve whatever goal they're after.
Yeah, I think it reflects like the maturity of the reader and the maturity of the storyteller. When you're young, you want to see someone just do it and get it done. You
Yeah.
can do it, so you might as well have a character who can do it right there and then. But then as you experience more life and you discover that life is really about failure and failing better,
Hmm.
I want to see my characters get beat down and just continue to go. Mage, the hero discovered number 6, is such a fast action comic. Like the first time I read it, I was just like, boom, and it was done. Like
Hmm.
it's an incredibly paced book. But then when I then read my Wikipedia entry about like, okay, what's the general idea of Mage, and then I went back, there is like a lot peppered into this action. Like a lot of the action is storytelling.
Hmm. Yeah, no, there's a lot of character, like a lot of showing the characters in this and like showing their relationships. Yeah, and world building. Because this is the first appearance of the Red Caps. So like we are very slowly being introduced to all these different fairy creatures that have come to our world.
And it pays off on that cover. It's a great cover. We didn't get the wraparound cover, and now I'm sad about that.
No, digital copies
But
stink.
the Red
Yeah.
Caps boots with their like spiky
Yeah.
soles, and then how those are implemented, and then how they are turned against the Red Caps. I feel like Matt Wagner knows how to give you a promise on the cover and then deliver and subvert from that cover.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's a good way to describe these covers. Like they're really compelling to me.
Yeah.
Well, some of them are a little bit corny, but yeah. And this one in particular, like the front cover is I don't think that great. But then when you see like the whole wraparound thing, it's like, wow,
Yeah,
that's
that's the whole
great.
thing.
Yeah, I mean, when you showing it there in the Zoom room, suddenly you're like, okay, well, I now feel really cheated that our physical copy did not show up.
Story.
Yeah.
Are there letters? Are there letters in the back? I love letters.
There are letters. In fact, the letter page on this one, the letter page was called Incantations.
Nice.
And this issue was so in the previous issue they announced a competition to guess somebody's middle name, and I don't remember if it was like Kevin Matchstick's middle name. So in this letters page it's just a list of the guesses so far, so it's just like
Oh, wow.
Fun.
and then saying that he hasn't found, nobody's won yet. So the first two, Achilles and Arthur,
Oh,
start with
yeah.
an A, and
Interesting.
every single other name in here starts with an L.
Fascinating.
That actually brings up a question I have. How long into the series was it when you became aware that Mirth was Merlin and that this was an Arthurian story?
You get clues. So the character who's missing from this issue, Edsel, almost calls him like my lord a bunch of times, and there's stuff
Gotcha.
like that. That's sort of revealed, I think, in issue 14,
Okay.
like right at
Okay.
the very end.
So
And it's
we
15
don't
issue
know
series.
that in this issue. We don't know that Kevin is King Arthur and Mirth is Merlin.
That's correct. Yeah,
Okay.
that's revealed way, way late in
That's
the
what I get for reading Wikipedia. Damn me.
story. What else do they got in this issue? They got some good Comico era ads. We got one for Next Man
Oh yeah.
that I read a little bit, but I barely have any recollection of. And then this Elementals ad that just has a graph going up and
Weird.
says rising to the top. Yeah. And I guess the other thing, I don't know if you get this digitally, but he has a forward in each.
No.
No.
Inside front cover has a forward, and here he's mostly introducing Sam Kieth and saying that he'll be contributing.
And I imagine that was for practical reasons. You want to get your book out at a relatively decent pace, and he needed
Yeah.
some backup on the inking duties. You talked a little bit about this, like when you were reading it and this would happen. Was it a sense of disappointment when Sam Kieth was inking Matt Wagner, or confusion? How did you react to an art change like that?
Well, having read just like big two superheroes, I was used to art changes.
Sure.
It was kind of par for the course. It wasn't like really um upsetting in that way. I was mostly confused, like just I was mostly just curious because I was like, how, because I knew that the artist hadn't changed, but the art had changed,
Right.
and I wasn't quite sure how that came across, came to pass.
Was this a moment of education for you? Because suddenly you see how different art could be with a new inker?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It definitely like opens you up to that part of the process. Like there's a couple books that I have on comic book storytelling that are like where they'll have like a same page and have a couple different inkers do it, and you can see the how their different approaches, and I have one that has like one script, and then 3 or 4 different artists will illustrate that, and you can see
Yeah,
how completely different the storytelling is.
I love
And
that.
and this was probably the first time I had ever seen anything like that and really like understood it. And after that, I was able to key in on like, oh, this inker is really good with this penciler, and not, this other inker doesn't do such a great job with that penciler, but they do a great job with this other guy. And
One of my favorite representations of that is the G.I. Joe issue, in which, again, I'm going to mention McFarlane again, where McFarlane was fired off of it. And then I think it's Marshall Rogers who came in and actually illustrated the issue last minute. But then after McFarlane became popular, Marvel published McFarlane's original pages as a G.I. Joe special. And
uh,
seeing those pages together, just seeing like how wildly different the storytelling is, was like a big eye-opening moment for my young brain.
yeah, wait, so did they draw the same script?
Yeah, same script, same Larry Hama script.
Oh.
I don't quote me on this, but I believe Larry Hama disliked McFarlane's pages when he got him in, and
Hmm.
like, we cannot publish this comic with these pages, so they shelved them, or whatever. And then they brought, again, I think it is Marshall Rogers in. It could have been Michael Golden, but I think it's Marshall Rogers. They come in and do the issue quickly, so it's not the best version of what Marshall Rogers could deliver. And
Hmm.
then many years later, in like 1992 or three, whatever, they published the McFarlane version of it.
Oh, that's hurtful.
Yeah.
Hurtful.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Yeah.
And now everybody's angry.
And that issue, that G.I. Joe special, to find a copy of that now is so difficult. It's impossible at a reasonable price. We saw one at Big Lick Comic Con in Virginia for $800. I was like, well,
Oh,
We're not
wow.
getting that.
we can't buy that. It was slabbed.
Yeah.
Everybody's slabbing things. I hate it.
I just discovered I have Spider-Man 300, and I did not realize that was worth as much money as it is.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah,
it was
yeah.
like $180 or $200 last time I looked it up.
It's one of the pricier books.
Yeah. One other thing, I'm gonna change the subject from issue
Please.
6, but issue 15 has something that I had never experienced in a comic before, and that is hold
Whoa!
Gatefold.
yeah, this
Is that a
gatefold.
dragon? I wasn't
Yeah,
done looking.
that's like this introduction. Well, the dragon has appeared before in the story,
Okay.
but this is the first time we see them in their true form. And yeah, it's like a 3-page spread of it, and it's just so fun. Like
That is fun.
if you're not expecting that and you get to that in a comic, it's like,
Give me that gimmick any day. That's the type of
yeah.
gimmick I want in a comic.
I love all like comic gimmicks.
Me too.
I think as long as they don't do them as like variants, I think gimmicks are amazing.
Yeah.
I'm all for it.
Like 3D chromium covers.
Yeah.
Special is not dumb. Special is special. Do something different. Think out of the box.
Special is special. Tyler, have we covered everything that you would want to cover with Mage 6?
God, it seems like there's so much about this book that just really like still gets me.
What was it like to return to it?
It was great. It's definitely one of those, like, there's not a lot of books that I have strong nostalgia for. I'm just not really a nostalgia guy, I don't think, but this definitely does like give me those feelings of like being a kid and reading these stories and being like just completely absorbed and having, there's those stories you can feel your brain being reprogrammed,
Yeah.
and when you reread them, it takes you back to that moment when your brain switched whatever switch got flipped, and you're like, oh yeah, this is where I learned that thing that I have carried with me.
Well, we were super happy for you to pick this book because we had just had Matt on the show with Kelly Jones to talk about his new Dracula book, which we freaking loved. And this was a great excuse to go back to where it all began for Matt Wagner. And I am definitely going to read the rest of the first series and maybe go beyond. But I think like my big takeaway from this conversation is looking at your copy and its colors and its
Mhm.
actual features that we were robbed from. Like, I need to read this physically.
Yeah, I would really encourage anyone who has the means to find the floppies. I need to get like I need to get one of the you know modern printed collections of it just for a reading copy. But yeah, they're just gorgeous. And it's sort of an artifact of its time too. It's colored with that blue line
Mhm.
technique where they would print out the line art as a non-photo blue, and then they would paint over that, and then the line art would go over as an acetate cover. And that's like lost technology. I remember a couple years ago I went into DC or not DC, into Dark Horse, and I was curious to know if it was even possible to make comics that way anymore. And my editor Daniel took me all around Dark Horse talking to every production person that had been around that long, and even they couldn't remember like where they ordered the blue lines from, or like what exactly the process was, because I think as soon as they got to digital stuff, they were like, thank God we never have to do this again. But it is just a gorgeous way of coloring comics.
We were talking to someone about acetate. It was Daniel and
Yeah,
Riley, right?
yeah. About the moon is following us. Yeah.
Yeah. So people are using acetate. I don't know if they're not using it in that way, I guess.
Yeah, I think
Ta-
that's just
yeah.
about everything. I did discover that I had forgotten. I had one of these issues signed by Matt Wagner, which was like
Oh,
Nice.
I had completely forgotten about. And then I got to the letters page and it said, "Thanks, Tyler, Matt Wagner." And
Where do you think you got that signed?
it was in a, a copy that I had two copies of. So I'm guessing that I was at a convention. I'm gonna guess. I don't really remember, but I think it was at APE, which was the
Hmm.
Alternative Press Expo in the Bay Area. I forget what city it used to be in. But I think that was where I met him. And I think I found out that he was there, and I had to find a copy and buy it so I could have something signed by him.
Yeah,
And I met Matt a couple times since then, and he's one of those dudes that was very gracious. And like when I was first working on my very first book, Petrograd, I was talking to one of my editors. I was in Portland for like a week or something, and I was talking to one of my editors, and I just saw they had like some original Matt Wagner art up on the wall, and I was like, if he ever needs an artist, let me know. I want to work with him. And they were like, well, I'll give him a call. And like I ended up being able to go out and have lunch
oh,
with Matt and just hang out and talk about getting into comics for a while. And
that's so
it
fun.
was just amazing that he took the time just to hang out with me at that point, because I like didn't even have anything published yet.
oh, good dude.
It was
Good
very,
dude.
very kind.
I hope it still happens. I would read that book.
Yeah, I have barely ever see him. Interesting. He lives in Portland, but every once in a while I've seen him at a comic event and talked, and he's always been really nice to me. But yeah, I don't get to see him as often as he's probably like my comic book hero. And so I'm kind of glad I don't see him too often, because I can't lose my shit over him too much,
Yeah. You got to maintain your cool in his presence. Always difficult to
Exactly.
do. Well, Tyler, thank you so much for introducing Mage to us. A new fandom is brewing. Tell our listeners what you've got cooking. We mentioned this at the beginning of the show, but The Lonesome Hunters is now available in this amazing library edition. Dark Horse did such a great job with that book.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm very happy with that. So we have oh my gosh, I think it's coming out next week. The Harrow County Complete Edition comes out next week. Lonesome Hunters. The book that I've been working on for the past year is gonna be announced next week, I think.
Okay.
Oh, a very
Um,
quick week.
Yeah, when's this coming out?
Well, so it's probably going to be in 2 weeks. We're trying to have another conversation with somebody to have a follow-up for this Married to Singles episode. So it won't publish next week. It'll be probably the week after or the week after that, actually.
I'll say this.
Okay.
I'm working with Chris Cantwell, who has
Okay.
been delightful. He's sort of best known for his work on TV, *Halt and Catch Fire*, but also his comics. He has a Plastic Man series coming out right now.
Yeah, it's great.
And it is a sort of a crime suspense story based on, or at least we're taking as a springboard, it's springboarding off of real events.
Oh,
So
interesting.
stay tuned. That'll be announced for real soon.
Okay. All right.
Ooh.
Excited about it. And again, please visit Tyler's YouTube page and hang out with him on Friday nights.
Yeah, come see me on the Cool Down. And I'm on Blue Sky. And
We're all on Blue Sky now.
Everyone's on Blue Sky now.
We've all
That's the
fled.
new-
We've all fled that other place.
Standing around, looking at each other, shaking our heads.
It's actually pretty great.
It is.
I'm really enjoying Blue Sky. It
Me
feels
too.
like
Yeah.
Twitter 2012.
For reals. It's like, yeah, it feels like back before Twitter just really became
A
Yeah.
a
hellscape.
mental health concern.
Well, thanks again, Tyler.
Thank you so much, guys. It's always great to talk to you.
Doopy doopy. Bum bum ba da bum bum ba da ba.